Miguel then dug up the area around the roots of the tree. Very surprising things were then presented in front of them. They were surprised and confused why there were so many corpses under the carnivorous tree. Seeing that scene, Philip then asked if they were all human sacrifices. He was really surprised to see so many humans were offered as a sacrifice to the tree. Philip then guessed, maybe the Master Laurel who disappeared had been, but he then immediately realized his carelessness and immediately stopped his words. Even so, Maeve understood what he meant. She then looked sharply towards the corpses buried there. The figure of her brother then appeared in her head. She still did not want to believe it. Although it is possible for him to fight against the darkness and vanish, but it is inconceivable that he will become a nutrient for this nameless evil creature. But she was still wondering, what if that's what happened? What if he fell into the trap and became a part of that evil creature even before fighting? If that was the case, with a heart full of anger, she is determined to risk everything to get the revenge. Noticing Maeve's bad mood, Ian then suddenly said, that the more he watched, the more he was convinced that this was not how the dark mage operated. Hearing that, Philip then surprisedly asked, did he mean that the dark mage did not use humans as the sacrifice to the tree? Ian replied, his method is different. He then explained, although he used corrupted magic power, he never used living beings as sacrifices like this. In addition, while showing the things he had found, Ian said, these people seem to be ordinary soldiers from the city of Orndell, who were assigned to transfer prisoners. Ian also thought, the deer horn symbol on the handcuff and identity plate, it says Orndell City's regular soldier, Dave. They were then surprised to hear that, after Philip observed the handcuffs that Ian had found, he also agreed with his guess. These were handcuffs and identity cards of Orndell soldiers from the kingdom. Ian then told them to try to think, why would someone who planned something in a place like this deal with soldiers? There was no way he would invite such danger for himself. Philip agreed with that. Maeve also reluctantly thought, that meant Vernon wasn't here. She blamed herself for being pathetic, getting emotional over something that isn't even sure. In that case, after defeating the dark mage, it seems that the destination for the next commission she mentioned is already confirmed, a large city in the Agellan Kingdom, the land of the Marquis Burchard, Orndell. Even if this is not related to the dark mage, it could have a connection with the corrupted person. So Ian then said he himself would go to Orndell and confirm what happened there. He then asked, what did she think? Philip could only be surprised to hear him decide on the next commission so lightly. Hearing that, Maeve then agreed. Philip was then surprised to hear that. He was surprised to hear Maeve make another commission. Maeve explained, this is necessary to find the hidden corrupted person. Seeing Philip's hesitation, Ian then said that the knight had already agreed, so he then told him to stop babbling and take the horse. Hearing that, Philip said he thought this was no time to joke, but when he saw Ian's serious look, he then realized that he was not joking, and he then immediately got the horse. While Maeve herself now still looked over thinking when she saw the corpse. Seeing that, Ian then called her, and asked if she could pray for these people. Maeve was then confused to hear that. Ian explained, he thought it would be good if he made them reach peace. Maeve finally realized that. She thought it was a good idea. She would do it, and Maeve then immediately asked for prayers for these poor people. Seeing that, Ian couldn't help but think, should he say that fortunately she was simple. Just a moment ago, she showed signs of losing her mind. She has already been tempted once, so there is a high probability that it will happen again. He knows this is only a temporary prevention, but he hopes holiness can calm her madness. In the midst of Maeve praying to the Holy Spirit, Ian thought, there is no proof that Vernon is dead, but he is confused why he feels bad about this. He can't help but wonder what Vernon is doing now. In the midst of her solemnity, Maeve was suddenly taken back to the scene she was with Vernon. She was watching him training. Vernon said to her that he will prove that he can surpass her, and he can lead the family alone. Hearing that, Maeve confusedly asked what he was talking about. She then told her brother that he was good enough, but unfortunately it did not succeed in convincing her brother. Maeve then tried to convince him once again. He didn't need to push himself too far, but Vernon suddenly told her that she really didn't know anything. Maeve was then confused to hear that. Vernon then turned to her, with red eyes with blood flowing from his eyes. Vernon said, she didn't even know he was dead. Maeve then woke up right at that moment. She wondered if it was a dream. What a ridiculous dream. And when she looked forward, she then saw Ian, who was riding a horse pulling a horse-drawn carriage. Beside the horse-drawn carriage, Miguel and Philip were seen walking along. Seeing that, she then asked if she was riding a carriage. Seeing her wake up, Ian then asked if she was awake. Still confused by the situation, Maeve then asked if she had fallen asleep for too long, and when he got this carriage. Hearing that, Ian felt like she didn't remember. He then explained the situation. When they were on the way, he said they should use the carriage that was left on the road. Maeve finally remembered after hearing that. She also thought she was so carried away that she didn't remember something like that. In the midst of struggling with her thoughts, Ian then said that if she woke up at the right time, they would soon reach the forest of graves. Maeve was then shocked to hear that. She really didn't expect them to arrive right when she woke up. She then asked Miguel why he didn't tell her first. Miguel was confused about how to answer. Fortunately, Ian immediately got him out of the unpleasant situation. Ian said that he had told Miguel not to tell her. If she knew, he knew that she would not be able to rest and behave like now. If she could not refute what he said, Ian told her to rest more. Maeve could only be surprised to hear that, but she then could only sigh helplessly. She would obey what he said. She would let him win this time. Seeing Miguel, who kept turning his head towards the two of them, Ian then irritably thought of gouging his eyes, and as they continued their journey, the horse carriage suddenly stopped. Seeing that, Miguel then confusedly asked why he stopped. Ian replied that it was not him, but the horse that did not want to go forward. Hearing that, while showing the contaminated essence, Maeve then said, "This bad omen is like what she felt in the contaminated essence she had." She then had some kind of guess. Ian confirmed it. Starting from here, this is evil territory. Hearing that, Philip then asked if he meant this was cursed land. Ian answered yes. He explained, this is a cursed and contaminated area filled with madness from the black wall. The rules of nature work differently from outside. They don't know what can be mutated here. He also thought, this is why no one has been able to get out after entering this place. From the beginning, it is indeed impossible to get out of this place. Maeve then said, it seems they have to leave the carriage here. She then told them to take what they need. Hearing that, Miguel then asked her to wait for a while. It seemed he heard Ian say that they would not be able to get out after entering. Hearing his frightened tone, Ian only replied that it was okay. This would disappear after they killed the dark mage. He think, Miguel was dumbfounded to hear that. It was very irresponsible. He then emphasized it once again. His job was to guide them to the entrance of the burial forest. Hearing that, while giving off a creepy aura, Ian then asked, so what, did he want him to kill him? Miguel was immediately frightened to hear that. He then said, what he wanted to say was that even in dangerous situations, he could rely on him. After they finished taking the necessary items, they then prepared to go in. Philip said he was ready. But this was scarier than he thought. Miguel was still feeling scared at this time. He also asked if it was true that they were going in. Ian just ignored his fears. He then asked Maeve, was she ready? Maeve replied, of course, she would not back down no matter what. Right after he said that, Ian then activated mana detection. It made him see a large black figure standing right in front of him. Ian grinned at that. He thought he must have known about their existence, but that wouldn't change anything. He was sure he was definitely not ready to meet the visitors. He could imagine how stupid he would look later. He had to pay for disturbing him by sending evil creatures. Ian also added, and give me experience points and rewards. In their exploration of the cursed forest, Philip was seen shivering while stepping cautiously. He then looked back, and hesitantly asked Ian, if they were going in the right direction. Ian confirmed it. Ian was annoyed to hear him ask that many times. Hearing that, Philip felt aggrieved. When night fell, they then made a fire. Philip asked if he thought the dark mage was in the forest of graves. He felt that maybe they were just wasting time. Hearing that, Ian said, just tell him he was scared. Philip then embarrassedly denied that he was afraid, pretending to be brave. He then said he would lead the way, but he then immediately regretted his words. But he consoled himself that Ian would not really ask him to lead in front. He then looked back, seeing the depressed Maeve. He then thought that he should focus. Seeing that, Ian also thought, so he still had courage, but he felt something strange, seeing the forest full of fog in front of him. Ian confusedly thought, how's this whole thing maintained? Corruption doesn't give you infinite mana. And when they finally got out of the barrier, they then asked if they were out. Philip then cried happily and thanked his God, Holy Spirit. Miguel also said he couldn't believe he could make it. He could see his life was about to come out. Seeing their behavior, Ian then told them to stop. Their problem was not over. While looking forward, towards the grave in front of him, Ian thought, finally I'm here. The entrance to the underground grave. while looking at the entrance that leads down, Maeve said, "This is the place." Miguel could only sigh because their journey was still continuing. Ian said, "From here on, he will lead the way." Hearing that, Miguel then hesitantly asked, would they go down there without making a plan? Hearing his doubts, Ian only replied, there was no time. He then told them to follow him, and they then climbed the stairs. The stairs were circular, so long that it was shaped like an endless abyss. When Philip was tired from walking for who knows how long, they then finally arrived at the entrance. Seeing that, he asked if they had reached the bottom. Ian did not respond, and continued to walk forward. A very dark and spacious room was then presented in front of them. It was so dark, Philip even felt that he could get claustrophobia. Seeing Ian, who wanted to keep walking forward, Maeve then asked him to stop for a while. She thought they needed to pray first. Hearing that, Ian then asked if there was a problem. Maeve replied, as they entered here, the echo of the stigma began to weaken. Ian was then confused when he heard the word stigma. Maeve explained, when chosen as an apostle, you accept a stigma. With a stigma, the apostle conforms to the God and receives holiness. Hearing that, Ian even felt it was like a slave contract. He almost gave up his soul without knowing that. He couldn't even trust the gods in this world. Even so. But Ian then invited her to pray. Maeve understood. She then took out her sword from its sheath, and posed like a knight. A bluish aura then appeared, which enveloped all areas of her body. In the midst of Maeve's solemn prayers, Miguel suddenly asked, why is there nothing here? Hearing that, Philip then asked, so what? Miguel said, the name of this place is Forest of Graves. He heard that there are hundreds of bodies buried here, but as far as he can see there are none. Hearing his confusion, Ian then said that he didn't need to question it. They were then confused to hear that. Ian didn't explain and just said, you will see for yourself. He had been preparing since they entered this place. When they were about to ask about what he meant, they then felt a movement from behind them. They were surprised to see the entrance suddenly close, and when the two of them ran towards it, the walls around them then appeared some kind of abstract writing. They could only be stunned by the sudden change, and when Philip carefully looked at the writing on the wall, he then asked if this was an ancient language. Ian said, this is the mana circuit. The grave magic system has begun to activate. Seeing many pairs of eyes staring at them from the front, Ian then said, the problem has just begun. The pairs of eyes turned out to be from the skeletons, so many that they could not be counted. They were now slowly walking towards them. Seeing that, Ian then took a weapon from his dimension pocket. He also said, without needing to say it, he had already shown that he is a necromancer. They were shocked when they saw the scene of Ian taking the weapon from his dimensional pocket. Philip asked where he pulled the weapon from. Miguel even suspected that he had seen it wrong. Ignoring their surprise, Ian then prepared to face the skeleton horde. While jumping towards the skeleton horde, Ian then told them to protect Maeve. They could only be surprised to see that and asked, would he attack alone? But their questions seemed to be unheard by Ian, because of how fast he sped towards the skeleton horde. A skeleton seemed to realize his existence, but before it could even prepare its attack, Ian had already destroyed it using one of his stick attacks. The other skeletons seemed surprised to see Ian could easily kill their kind. Not stopping there, Ian then cast Whirling Barrier, which made the skeletons around him blown away. Without a moment's pause, Ian then returned to prepare his attack. He cast Wind Sword Blade, and made it envelop the tip of his stick. And as Ian rushed to attack them again, the skeletons seemed to be able to see the shadow of their future death, and it was realized shortly after that, because Ian arbitrarily slaughtered them with a swing of his stick. Looking at the tip of the stick that he had cast with magic that made him able to slaughter the skeletons easily, Ian thought this wasn't bad, so this felt like using the Wind Sword Blade skill on a stick-shaped weapon. It felt like using a hammer, but Ian couldn't relax yet, because the battle wasn't over yet. There was a skeleton with a different aura from the other skeletons. It was the dark mage who was still hiding and watching like a mouse. Ian then looked back and saw Maeve, who was still praying. Seeing that, Ian thought this was still not the time. The more the number of skeletons, the higher the possibility that one of them would die. What he needed to do now was, Ian then provoked the dark mage by asking if he was afraid. If so, he then told him to watch carefully from behind there. He would destroy all the heads of his toys. What Ian needed to do was quite simple, namely luring him out. The dark mage seemed to be very angry at his provocation. While cursing him, he then released a very powerful aura around. Philip and Miguel were then surprised when they saw it. And the skeletons who had previously seemed to just let themselves be slaughtered, suddenly became aggressive, but Ian was even happy to see that, because it meant that the dark mage was successfully provoked. While preparing his attack again, Ian then said, "Let's see who will survive." The two of them could only feel shocked when they saw Ian's fight against the skeletons. Philip then asked, should they help him? The number of skeletons is very large. Hearing that, Miguel then asked him back, did he not hear what Ian said earlier? They must protect Maeve. In the midst of her solemnity and prayer, Maeve suddenly called the two of them, and told them to open the way, and as Ian continued his slaughter, Maeve then came with her sword. Seeing that, Ian said that she was too late. Even so, it allowed him to rest himself for a moment. He could leave the next thing to Maeve. Maeve then turned her sword, and instead of holding the hilt, she held the blade. After that, she then swung it with a force that made the skeletons in front of her shattered. The skeletons' limbs flew everywhere due to that, but Maeve's attack did not stop there. She then once again swung her sword, which made a lot of skeletons shattered there. Seeing that, Ian thought, he felt so useless every time he saw that, but, although it seemed that Maeve alone was enough to finish off the skeletons, Ian thought, he would not continue to watch, and when an undead was about to sneak attack towards Maeve, Ian then quickly cut down the undead. Maeve was then surprised to see that. Ian then looked at her as a silent understanding. With the swing of their weapons together, they then together slaughtered the undead that were there. Philip could only be stunned to see it, but he then immediately woke up from his shock. When Miguel asked him what he was doing, he told him to keep following. Hearing that, Philip immediately rushed forward. I don't know how long it has been, the two of them are still continuously slaughtering the undead that are there. Maeve already looks exhausted. One of Maeve's weaknesses is her endurance, but strangely she looks too tired. Most importantly, her holy power does not seem to be enough. Ian then wondered if her connection with the Holy Spirit was getting weaker, but as they continued to move forward, they were then surprised when they saw a dead end in front of them. Ian was then surprised and asked, what happened? He was surprised when he saw mana flowing through the writing on the wall. The two of them were also confused when they saw it, but they were then surprised when they saw a wrist of the skeletons that had been destroyed. Philip also asked what was wrong with the skeletons, but they were then surprised when the bodies of the skeletons and undead that had been destroyed suddenly flew in one direction and merged. Seeing that, Maeve thought, it was the immortal stalker, the Dreg of Death. Philip was very scared when he saw it. It looked very creepy to him. Ian was also quite surprised when he saw it. It appears earlier than in the game. He then wondered what because the criteria for collecting enough undead had been met. Philip was then very scared when he saw the Dreg of Death slowly moving towards them. Miguel was also very panicked at this time. The way forward was closed. They had no escape route, but he was then surprised and happy when he saw a door suddenly open nearby. But his joy did not last long, because instead of a way out for them, the door wreaked havoc by sending a large number of undead and skeletons surrounding them. Miguel then panicked greatly seeing that. Ian did not feel so panicked. It actually made him conclude that the dark mage should be on a deeper floor, but he still felt annoyed. He must have prepared hard. Being a sandwich among monsters is probably the right sentence to describe their current situation. Maeve then said to him, she thought she had to kill the big monster. Hearing that, Ian asked her not to force herself to kill it. Just keep it under control. He would create a way to escape. Maeve understood, and she then rushed towards the big monster, while Ian himself towards the horde of undead. While Ian and Maeve were fighting against the monsters there, Philip and Miguel themselves were confused about what they should do while feeling tremendous anxiety. When Ian managed to destroy the undead using the swing of his stick, the broken limbs of the undead then flew towards the Dreg of Death. Ian had expected this. It was like in the game. The broken skeletons were absorbed by the Dreg of Death. It was like an infinite source of energy. Even so, the plan was going well for now. There were some minor changes, but if they continued to go like this, as he planned, but he was then surprised when he saw a creature flying above them all. Ian could only curse at the sight of it. He also wondered what it was doing up there. The creature is the lake specter. The specter is an evil creature that lives around the lake, luring people to absorb their life energy, drowning women into the lake, possessing their bodies for its use. Ian thought they shouldn't meet it now. What it also worked under the dark mage, not giving him time to think further. The lake specter then controlled the undead, and ordered them to rush to attack Ian. Ian was surprised at their fast speed, but fortunately he was able to react quickly. He was then able to quickly finish them off using the swing of his stick. Not stopping there, Ian then swung his stick to attack the lake spectre. But unfortunately his attack could be skillfully avoided by it. But Ian then became worried, when he saw the spectre flying towards Philip and Miguel. The lake spectre looked like he was preparing something, and his empty eyes then suddenly lit up. At that moment, Ian felt it, that the lake spectre would release a flurry, a skill that would not only cause damage, but also confusion for a long time. Ian quickly concluded as soon as he felt it, if the spectre was not stopped, Philip and Miguel would die. Realizing that, Ian then quickly told the two of them to cover their ears now. With a feeling of worry, Ian then finally cast his fire magic. They were then shocked to see it. They initially did not know that Ian was a mage. Ignoring their reactions, Ian then shot the fire magic towards the spectre. Panic could be clearly seen in its eyes as it saw the approaching attack, and without even having time to dodge, the fireball then quickly hit it. The attack made the spectre burn heavily. The two of them still seemed unable to process what they had just seen, and they then together turned to Ian. Confusion and shock could be clearly seen in their eyes as they looked at him. But when Miguel was about to ask about it, Ian then quickly told them that this was not an action manhwa, and told them to come back to their senses as soon as possible. Hearing that, they finally realized that they were still in a dangerous situation, although his true identity as a mage was revealed. But Ian didn't feel so bad. He tried to save it just in case, but now that he had used it, it felt good. Since he had used it, he would make the most of it. From now on, Ian wouldn't hold back anymore.